Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. I have with me in the studio today Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bulitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies, Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Victor C. Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Well, very quickly, Prof. Before we move ahead, we had as our guest Senator Ajibola Bashiru, the spokesperson of the Ninth Senate. And he was talking about a number of issues, principally about the fact that the National Assembly is not planning to gag the media in Nigeria, despite the controversies before us. And he also addressed other issues, including the flooding of the lobby of the National Assembly on Tuesday, and as well as issues about open grazing, restructuring, the petroleum industry bill, how much cooperation ministries and departments and agencies are giving the Auditor General's office with regard to the fight against corruption. But your take on some of the issues that he addressed.
You raised 7 or 8 issues, but let me address 3 of them. The issue of gagging of the press, the issue of SERAP, especially within the framework of the
international law. Yes,
international law. And then the National Assembly's flood. Now, in terms of gagging of the press, he gives the impression, emphatically, that there is no arrière-pensée, that is ulterior motive behind the need to regulate. He gave the impression that they are only trying to regulate and that the opponents of what they are trying to do are misunderstanding the regulatory role of the National Assembly. Probably for reasons of psychology of human differences, he may be right. But the extent to which he thinks that he's more patriotic than SERAP, that has gone to the ECOWAS court to lodge a complaint, and the extent to which he's using the argument of international law to defend his position. I think this is where we really need to agree to disagree. First of all, SERAP, you rightly pointed out, made efforts. But the senator is telling us that he has not exhausted all local remedies. International law talks about exhaustion of local remedies. And his interpretation, the interpretation of Senator Bashiru, is that if, for instance, you make effort at the lower level of the court and you couldn't get satisfaction, you can go to the appeal court, you can still go to Supreme Court. So in his understanding of exhaustion of local remedies, you must have gone through all the levels, meaning that you must actually must have been denied justice before you can go to a supranational authority. Now, in this case, there's a fundamental difference between that notion of exhaustion of local remedies. What we are talking about is not the procedure. He's telling us about the procedures of lawmaking and so on and so forth. The issue at stake now is that there is the suspicion that the National Assembly has this type of agenda. That is what it should be addressing, not the procedural approach. SERAP is more patriotic than the people in the National Assembly. And okay.
On that note, Prof, let's just take another break here on Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show. When we return, the conversation will continue. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me, I have Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bulitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Victor C. Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos. Now, before we went on break, Prof, you had made 2 points arising from the submissions of Senator Bashiru. If you may just go ahead.
Yes, I was trying to talk about SERAP. The issue is that in the eyes of Senator Bashiru, he sees a bad person in SERAP, whereas that is not true. He believes that because they have misrepresented the fine imposed, the complaints that he shouldn't have just gone to ECOWAS without having settled the misunderstanding at the local level. I think that what SERAP has done has prompted him to react. On the issue of grazing, I think I so much admire his, his articulating of the problematic there. He differentiated between the law that existed in the north, contrary to what obtains in the south, that there is truly grazing rules in the north, but there was no specific understanding of a trading route in the agreement, and that in the south is completely different. I think it's very correct. That is the truth about research. I've tried to research into the gray areas, and that's why even as of today in my column, I went back to the doctrine of uti possidetis and terra nullius to now say that, look, the thinking that there is a free land which can be acquired, inherited by the herdsmen cannot be tenable. What we have in these southern areas, what the law provides for is farm settlements. So in this case, I think we should commend him for that one and for looking at issues more objectively.
Well, Yemi Adamalekun, let me come quickly to you. Senator Ajibola Bashiru's defense about the fact that there's no attempt to gag the press and that there's nothing called absolute freedom. And then his conclusion that the SERAP, that NGO called SERAP, has not been patriotic enough for going to the ECOWAS Community Court without exhausting internal processes in Nigeria, as he claims.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it's kind of hard to exhaust existing processes when your courts are closed. So I think the senator was being smart by half by failing to recognize that when SERAP went to the ECOWAS court, the Nigerian courts were actually closed. So I'm really not quite sure what he was expecting them to do, wait till the Nigerian government decided to obey its own constitution by allowing the judiciary to be independent, which was what the strike was about in the first place. And as you were also trying to correct him, you were trying to inform him that they have now gone before a Nigerian court. But the context, again, just for clarity, was that SERAP approached the ECOWAS court because the Nigerian courts were on strike. That number one. Number two, I think two things that he did say that I did agree with was the issue of fines. I think even if you spoke about the petroleum industry bill, part of the amendments to the bill was that fines, for example, for gas flaring was 50 kobo or something ridiculous like that. So by the nature of our laws, if they're not amended, the fines in them become obsolete and no longer a deterrent. Because if the fine to do something grievous is only 100 naira, I factor that into my cost. And he's right. If the Press Council or Guild of Editors or whatever body has a problem with the fines, let them come forward and explain why they think they're too extreme and propose different fines. I completely agree with Professor Akinteriwa. His points around grazing and just seeking clarity on, or stating the clarity on that, I think it's quite accurate to the point that he said the executive might have been misadvised or misinformed. And lastly, the point he made about his party, I thought was quite powerful. Being able to admit that the party did promise in 2015 and 2019 they were going to look into issues of devolution of powers and restructuring. It's something Malam El-Rufai has consistently talked about and is still talking about. And so telling Mr. President that, saying that Mr. President wasn't being fair in a sense, by pushing it to the National Assembly for them to deal with, since it's something the party promised, was also quite important. However, I think I would like to speak to the spirit, and I think you mentioned that point, Dr. Abati, the spirit of the National Assembly, which is why Nigerians don't like them and don't trust them. So one of the things that the organization I lead and some others have been advocating for years is electronic voting. So as we all know, the National Assembly, all in favor say aye, aye, all in favor say nay, nay, the nay or the ayes have it, which sometimes as an outsider, you heard nay strongly, but they will bang the gavel on aye. So we said, you know what, not only is it easier if you vote electronically, it also helps your constituents who you represent know how you voted, so we can engage with you on your voting record. But the National Assembly has consistently refused to do that. And it's not because they can't, because the gadgets are there, they work. And I think if I remember correctly, Senator House of Rep Speaker Bajabiamila revealed last year that they have upgraded or they're upgrading the technical equipment. And the simple point it provides, it allows you to track efficiently who voted for what or abstained, and allows me as a citizen to know how my representative voted. So the fact that that's not something that they're active about, for Senator Bashir to be talking about the National Assembly members are there in the interest of the people, blah, 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 blah. The actions don't align with that. And secondly, the issue of public hearing. So he went through the whole process of how a bill gets to be law. Yes, we know. Well, you do public hearings in Abuja. We have 36 states. So if I cannot afford to fly to Abuja or don't have anyone that can go and represent my own position, public hearings are literally out of the ambit of Nigerians. And I remember particularly during the COVID lockdown that there was a public hearing on the proposed amendment to the NCDC Act. We pushed for there to be a virtual hearing. So we begin to put that into practice so that it expands the space for Nigerians to participate in these conversations. And the National Assembly refused. And that included civil society organizations being willing to fund the setup of the infrastructure so that it could be inclusive for other Nigerians. And they refused. So I think for me, there's, yes, the talk of the role of the National Assembly and what they do and what they're supposed to do, but I think the spirit and how they actually act out their representation of the Nigerian people speaks to a very different engagement.
Okay, thank you, Yemi. Professor Ariole, over to you.
Well, I have listened to the distinguished Senator Bashiru, and on press gagging, I agree with what he said, that they should go through the local processes and see how best it could be tackled before moving further to international courts like ECOWAS courts. And again, as he said, the Constitution is supreme, of course. Whatever you state in the bill that does not comply with the Constitution will be null and void. He said it. And I love that part of it. And again, as you said, Dr. Bati, that this is like sub judice, because somebody is already in Supreme Court trying to prove that that bill should not even be initiated and to talk about going first, second, and third reading. And it means the legislator should take that into consideration. They should take it into consideration because the person proposing the bill, just like the distinguished senator said, is the chairman of House of Reps Information. So she said. And it means that he has already taken side. It would have been someone else proposing the bill and could have made sense as, well, he's not going to take side. But him proposing the bill as a private member's bill seems to be a bit on the uncomfortable side for the journalists. And I know that journalism, as the fourth realm of the estate, could be the only realm among the four that could be seriously talking for the public, because others who claim to have been elected could be talking to the proportion of who elected them, like the president used to say, that he can't even give him his person to the 5% of people who voted or whatever. So there is need seriously to be worried about anybody trying to gag journalism or the press, and this is where the works of Dr. Tony Momo, who happened to be someone who worked very hard to see that journalism is highly professionalized, and people like Professor Akim Fele be brought into this space, and they should review what they have presented. They have worked hard to put it to the National Assembly, to put it to Nigerians, that journalism should be a profession that must be respected. And like everybody knows, a journalist is like a lawyer. His stake is at is his personality and his probity is at stake. It's not what we call about liberal journalism anyway, which is where the current media, social media falls in. I mean, in School of Journalism, we know there could be private journalism, which is independently owned, and they should also be mindful of the kind of journalists they employ, which will also be journalists that are of high integrity. The same thing, we have government media and government press like NTA. Of course, they should be working for maybe public relations of the government or whoever is in government, but it also have to be journalists who really know their onion to be at the public relations side of the government. So I expect the legislatures to be very careful and really bring the journalists into the camera of this job they are doing, calling it a private membership bill.
Well, it's an old issue between the Nigerian media and the Nigerian government, because the Nigerian media groups have always said they will prefer self-regulation. And that was why, you know, in the past, in the 90s, the Nigerian Press Organization set up what they called the Ombudsman, which was led at the time by Alhaji Alade Odunewu. And all these groups within the media, they have their rules, they have code of conduct. But to have the Ministry of Information or a minister controlling broadcasting organizations or controlling the press is what principally the Nigerian media is fighting. And, you know, the perception, the suspicion that this administration in particular has been doing too much to constrict the civic space is what is responsible for this objection. Prof, you wanted to say something?
Yes, you see, we need to put the understanding of exhaustion of local remedies in context, so that we don't go with the impression that the senator was right, as Professor Arule is trying to give. You see, the finality of exhaustion of local remedies is to ensure that there is no denial of justice. So when you are denied justice, then the next thing you go to the next level. So it's not the process, you know, that we are talking about.
Let's quickly take our next topic, which is also something that Senator Bashiru had addressed. Nigeria's symbol of democracy, the National Assembly building, is in urgent need of repairs. This is because the foyer of the Senate lobby leaked during a heavy rainfall last week. In spite of this, the building may not be fixed anytime soon because of buck passing between lawmakers, Abuja city officials, and President Muhammadu Buhari's cabinet. Arise political editor Sumna Sambo has a report on that, but we'll take it when we return from this break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, Professor Bola Akinterenwa, Professor Victor Siariole, and Yemi Adamolekun. But first, before we move on, let's take that report about the roof leakages at the National Assembly of Nigeria's National Assembly building in Nigeria on Tuesday this week. Sumna Sambo, Arise News correspondent, reports. Here is the report.
Workers scoop rainwater dropping from the roof into the lobby of the Senate wing of the National Assembly complex after a heavy downpour, preventing movement close to the chamber. Many Nigerians have expressed outrage over the development as they hit lawmakers for failing to renovate the facility despite their huge annual budgets. The National Assembly building is the country's leading monument that projects the country's return to democracy. But this edifice is now at the mercy of what some call shadowy politics of renovation. The lawmakers had in 2019 requested for a renovation of the National Assembly complex at a huge sum of 37 billion naira, which they said was costed for its repairs by the Federal Capital Development Authority, or FCDA, that is the custodian of national assets in Abuja. But Nigerians kicked against the costs, saying it was prohibitive. The public uproar made President Muhammadu Buhari's government to hold back its renovation. But lawmakers could not sail through, despite insisting that the building was due for renovation after more than 20 years since it was built. But with Wednesday's heavy downpour due to the leaking roof, there is now a blame game. Lawmakers are asking Nigerians not to blame them for the disrepair of the parliament building, despite having a 9 billion naira budget for general repairs. They put the blame at the doorstep of President Muhammadu Buhari's cabinet.
When the sum of 37 billion was made as provision in the initial 2020 budget, the media went to town castigating and calling the National Assembly members all kinds of names. Now, at the end of the day, like we all knew, of course, the pandemic came, and at the end of the day, that amount was reduced to about 9 billion, so that they can take the rehabilitation in phases. As we speak, nothing has been done until yesterday, like we all saw, the leakage across the complex. This is a vindication of what the leadership and indeed the Senate and members of the House of Representatives saw with respect to this edifice, which is a national monument. This is the house of Nigerians.
Anyone who sees what we have here knows that this place is overdue for rehabilitation. It's even worse downstairs. So we went to see Mr. President to complain to him that there's need to rehabilitate and renovate the National Assembly complex after being used for about 20 years and not rehabilitated at all. This house is the house of Nigerians, not the house of members of the National Assembly. This place belongs to Nigerians and it deserves to be renovated.
FCDA says the reason for the dilapidating roofs of the complex, especially the area known as White House, during the downpour is because no contract has been awarded to any company for its maintenance. The agency claims that the cumbersome nature of approving contracts by the Federal Executive Council has hindered the NASS building renovation, as the FCDA cannot do so without budgetary provision or contract approval by the cabinet. Until these bureaucracies are cleared, it looks like federal lawmakers will have to learn how to swim through the waters that may continue to flow in different areas of the National Assembly building during heavy downpour. A spokesman of the Federal Capital Development Authority, which maintains this huge National Assembly complex, says the major problem actually lies with the Federal Executive Council, which is yet to give a contract approval for the renovation of the facility, after federal lawmakers had initially asked for 37 billion naira for its total renovation. So the agency is still awaiting the award of the contract to fix the National Assembly complex. Sumner Sambu, Arise News.
Well, this was one of the issues that our guest today, Senator Bashiru, spokesperson of the Senate, addressed. But here we have this additional report by Arise News correspondent Sumner Sambu. Professor Ariole, let me start with you. The Senator made it clear that the National Assembly has no blame in the matter, and that it's the responsibility of the executive arm of the government to renovate and maintain the National Assembly complex.
Well, as you earlier pointed out, it's buck passing. The point remains that the National Assembly still remains the oversighting department, it has its own oversighting function on FCDA. And whatever the case be, they have been proving that they have been oversighting other departments, parastatals. I wonder why they are not able to put it to FCDA that this National Assembly is at risk of falling. It's unfortunate, and that's also a metaphor of the general situation of Nigeria. That rain pouring into the National Assembly is like rain pouring into Nigeria. Both Nigerian economy, both Nigerian social disposition, both Nigerian security is a great metaphor for the whole world to see that Nigeria is really in discrepit and something very, very fast got to be done. There is no need for buck passing. The Senate President has proved a vindication, but I'm just worried. Senate President, number 3 man of this Nigeria, are saying is vindicated. Vindicated that you need the money, agreed. But you are not vindicated that you allowed it to go into descriptive form. That is not allowed at all.
Well, Yemi, very quickly, your take on this subject. Will CSOs, civil society organizations, begin to think of the option of swimming lessons for members of the National Assembly in Abuja as a way out?
Oh, they can learn how to swim if they want. That's not my own headache. I have other things to worry about. But I really wanted to go back quickly to the issue of media suppression. And I think it's important, and Senator Bashiru sort of made light of that. Between 2015 and 2019, there have been 4 different bills tried to be passed as private member bills within the National Assembly, which is why people focus on them, to gag press freedom. So 2015, Frivolous Petitions Prohibitions Bill. 2019, Hate Speech Prohibition Bill. 2019, National Commission for the Prohibition of Hate Speeches Bill. 2019, Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulations Bill. Now, so as we've discussed previously, the focus on the platforms are not why Nigerians are truly upset and are speaking and speaking loudly. Again, we keep going round and round it. And members of the media keep getting arrested for posting things on Facebook against the Cybercrime Act or whatever, defamation or lies, because politicians don't like being called out. So there is a deliberate attempt. And let's also not forget that the media, as enshrined in the Constitution, has a role to hold government accountable. So it is.
Section 22. Well, but let me go back to Prof, since you don't want to comment on the leaking roof in the National Assembly. No, Prof has the floor now.
Yeah, Prof. You see, Yemi cannot be more correct on this one. However, on this flood, you see, what Yemi is trying to say is the fraudulent attitude of our leaders to all these things. I don't see the flood as the problem. The major problem itself is the lack of maintenance culture. Under normal circumstances, why should the leaders be waiting until 20 years to look at whether the monument is decrepit or not? Under normal circumstances, when the structure was put in place, there's always a period guarantee maintenance. When I used to be concierge, caretaker, cleaning in Paris, I saw the French people changing bitumen. And I asked the question, why are you changing this thing? It's still good. He said the bitumen must be changed after 50 years. And I was surprised, but nothing is wrong with it. They now say, no, they don't have to wait for that. The period has lasted. You know, in this particular case, the roof, there must be a period that you must have, put in place for it to be changed. Agreed. So you don't have that. We don't have maintenance culture. One last word. Look, in my place, in Ondo State, 1921, look at what the leaders had done. The roads with the gutters, with everything, setbacks. Now, today, you go there, you see people building houses on roads. 2021. 1921, the problem was not there. What type of education do we now have? What type of professionals do we have today?
Well, very quickly, Yemi, let me come back to you before we take the next topic. You were going to comment on the state of the National Assembly complex.
Just to reiterate, I guess, what Prof said about maintenance culture, and the fact that, for me, I think the fact that, one, they call it the House of Nigerians. Nigerians don't have access to that building, by the way. You can't even go there to see your representative as a Nigerian citizen without plenty drama. But secondly, I think for me, it's, there's an English word for it which escapes me at the moment. It's a symbol or is a representative of the state of the nation. A nation that you don't take care of will eventually cave in on you. And on top of your head is where you begin to have problems. And then, as Nigeria is wont to do, we will now begin to blame people rather than actually say, oh, we have a problem, let's fix it. But no, it's the president. No, it's the cabinet. No, it's FCDA. No, it's a contractor. But for me, it's an excellent symbol. There's an English word, Dr. Bati, help me find the English word.
A metaphor. A metaphor, right?
God bless you. That's the word. It's a fantastic symbol for the Nigerian condition. Thank you.
Okay.
A metaphor, right?
Yes. So anyway, let's move on very quickly to our next topic, which is the United Nations Development Program report. The UNDP has released a report showing that Northeast Nigeria's conflict with Islamist insurgencies has killed nearly 350,000 people as of the end of 2020. The toll given by the United Nations Agency in a new study on the war and its impact on livelihoods is 10 times higher than previous estimates of about 35,000 since the conflict started 12 years ago. Boko Haram launched an uprising in 2009, displacing more than 2 million persons from their homes and spawning one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with millions of people dependent on aid. Children younger than 5 account for some 324,000 deaths, more than 9 out of 10 of those killed, with 170 dying every day, the UNDP said. Of nearly 350,000 deaths from the conflict, it estimated 314,000 to have resulted from indirect causes. Sad, but is anyone surprised that Nigerians, and particularly children and women and families, are paying such a huge price for the crisis of insecurity in the northeastern part of the country? But I don't know if anyone here on this panel would doubt the truthfulness, of the report by the United Nations Development Agency. Let me start with you, Professor Akinterenwa.
In fact, the figures left to me, they are at best near inaccuracy. It has underestimated the number. I want to strongly believe that they try to, at least to, they try to give the impression that things are still better. I think the figure, look at it this way. Let's assume that the number is 350,000, not just near. I am saying it is more. Divide 350,000 by 12 years. That will give you 29,166 number of deaths per year. Should you divide 29,166 by 12 months, that will give you 2,430 deaths per month. Now divide 2,430 by 30 days, that will give you 81 deaths per day. Now in 12 years, if about 81 people die, now it's most unfortunate. How many of the children are involved? Humanitarian law prohibits the killing of non-combatants, of institutions that are not directly engaged in battles. But what we are now seeing is that we have killing of even children that are under 5 years of age. Most unfortunate. More importantly, when you look at the year 2030, it is being speculated that 1.1 million people may die. Now, this speculation ignores the environmental conditionings. It assumes that the variance, the dynamics will remain the same. It does not look at the possibility that the war can deteriorate, that there could be more killings. The computation of 1.1 million is on the basis that the variance will remain the same. So in this case, I think that, like the report says, if nothing is done to quickly nip in the bud the problems, the issues, then we will be in for it.
Which is where the challenge lies, that government needs to do a lot more. Other stakeholders also have to do a lot more. Yemi, I recall that you were part of an event earlier this year, National Mourning Day, where there was an estimate given about the number of persons that have died this year alone. But now, over a period of 12 years, the UNDP is giving another figure. What are your thoughts on this in terms of lives lost and what government needs to do to prevent avoidable deaths?
I think I will agree with Prof that it is a gross underestimation. And again, it's important to put it in context that this number is for the Northeast alone. So fast forward now in 2021, we're dealing with deaths literally across the country from a variety of reasons, not just Boko Haram. So kidnapping, banditry, armed robbery, just people dying for clashes, community clashes, herdsmen, whatever the case may be. What government needs to do, a starting point, is just to show that human lives matter. I think the posture of engaging with criminals, the posture of not honoring the dead, the posture of the fact that the country itself, this data is from the United Nations. Nigeria as a country cannot tell you the number of its citizens that has died over the last, not even 6 months, much less the last 12 years. And this is, there are quite a number, I think the Council of Foreign Relations and a few other bodies actually are tracking the number of deaths. There's an organization in Nigeria now, or two organizations, I would say, Global Rights, which coordinates the National Day of Mourning on May 28th every year. This year was the 4th year that has happened. And May 28th was chosen so that for our then Democracy Day on May 29, it would force the government to actually acknowledge that there's a problem. And the other organization is SBM Intelligence, who are trying to track not only the number dead, because you see in news reports, 20 people died or 30 people died in communities, but also humanize them. So we not only have numbers, but we also have names. It's an ongoing process. It's a long journey because the state doesn't recognize its citizens in that regard. So if there's one thing that I would say the Nigerian government should do beyond trying to solve our insecurity problem, but is even to humanize the people that have been victims of it, in setting up a process from a missing persons register for those who are kidnapped to a register that documents the dead, so we know where these things are happening to who and where, and the circumstances of their death.
Well, Professor Ariole.
Well, I'm worried that a government that is supposed to care for the welfare and the security of its citizens allow up to 30,000 people, almost 30,000, just like Professor mentioned, you know. It's unfortunate.
He said.
Yeah, he said 30,000 a month, 29,000 a month.
Okay.
But that's about 30,000, you know. That's what Professor Akinterewa mentioned.
39,160.
Yes, and that's about 30,000 a month.
Okay.
And we know that in Ethiopia, the Tigray case, that is not up to even 6 months, it started happening. Already Prime Minister has resigned, and the place has been declared an emergency zone. I don't see why the government of Nigeria cannot declare Borno State just for 1 year, emergency zone, and clear everything and go so that we go back to normalcy. Instead of delaying for 10 years or 12. And even the former chief of army staff is claiming that it could go up to 20 years. Does it mean they have planned in advance how is they going to tackle the killing of the people or allow people to die till 20 years? I wouldn't know. It's a problem. I expect that as at now, emergency case be declared in Borno State and let us clear those debris of Boko Haram within 6 months.
Yeah, the Sambisa forest.
And that's all, because it doesn't take more than 3 months or 4 months to clear Boko Haram if really the area is declared an emergency zone and save the civilians from dying further. Seriously, that's how I see it. Declare the place emergency zone and do something needful to clear the Boko Haram presence there, and that's all. So that the French people that they claim are the people creating problem there, just like it is seen recently, that there are ammunition training center in even Borno State by a French NGO, which is very dangerous and very delicate. We don't know what they're training them for. And which means Borno State is no man area as far as I'm concerned now. And it's supposed to be declared emergency zone.
Well, just by way of information, you recall that the president of Nigeria just visited Borno State,
Exactly.
where he commended the state government and other stakeholders, including the JTF and vigilante groups, for their efforts in maintaining the peace, although he pointed out that there's still a lot more work to be done. And in the confidence-building process, he commissioned so many projects by the governor of Borno State. I don't know.
That's not beyond Meduguri.
Whether the federal government will agree on the basis of all of that there should be a state of emergency.
Exactly. 1 year is sufficient. They should think about that.
Let's move on very quickly. Now it's about the COVID-19 vaccine. The two professors should be on standby. I'm interested in your comments. The head of the World Health Organization said on Monday that the UN agency is in discussions with companies and institutions to create the first ever technology transfer hub for coronavirus vaccines in South Africa. At a press briefing in Geneva, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus explained that the consortium involves a company called Afrigen Biologics and Vaccines, which will act as a hub both for making mRNA vaccines and by providing training to other manufacturers to make these shots.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that relying on a few companies to supply global public goods is limiting and dangerous. To boost manufacturing, WHO has continued to call for the sharing of know-how, technology, and licenses, and the waiving of intellectual property rights. Today, I'm delighted to announce that WHO is in discussions with a consortium of companies and institutions to establish a technology transfer hub in South Africa. The consortium involves a company called Afrigen Biologics and Vaccines, which will act as the hub both by manufacturing mRNA vaccines itself and by providing training to a second manufacturer called BioVac.
In addition, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, said Africa is working with the European Union and other partners to help create regional vaccine manufacturing hubs with Nigeria, Senegal, Rwanda, and South Africa to create regional production hubs in tandem with open supply chains for more promising path to preparedness for future health crises. Well, all of this is in line with the call by the WHO, by the WTO, and by other stakeholders across the world, particularly India and South Africa, that the supply chains have to be opened up, that there should be vaccine equity, that there should be global solidarity, which was one of the outcomes of the G7 meeting in Cornwall in the United Kingdom. But to what extent would the emergence of production hubs in Africa help to address this concern about the third wave in Africa, with some of our countries, South Africa, Uganda, and Morocco and Algeria, recording a spike in cases of coronavirus. Even in Ghana, there's been a report that the Delta variant, the B1617, has been cited in some cases in the northern part of the country. Well, Professor Akinterenwa, this is about global equity and solidarity. To what extent can Africa becoming production hubs, be part of this process?
I asked the first question. Do the people of Africa actually want an mRNA vaccination hub? I asked this question because it is the policy intention of the World Health Organization
and WTO
and the World Trade Organization. Now they are thinking for us that we should have it. They are the sponsors, basically. Why is it that the people of Africa themselves are not in the forefront?
Well, Senegal, Morocco, Egypt are already in partnership with some countries,
yes,
and they are producing vaccines. Egypt in particular, has an operation. Even South Africa is in partnership with Johnson & Johnson through the Aspen Pharmaceutical.
If I ask the question, it's because I have a direction I am trying to move towards. Because first of all, I ask myself, why is it that the first factory is being considered for South Africa? Why is it now that, okay, after South Africa, secondarily, they are now saying, well, Nigeria, Senegal, Rwanda, and so on and so forth will be considered, that they are under consideration. I ask myself, why is the priority given to South Africa?
South Africa has the highest rate of infection and accounts for about 50% of the infection rate and mortality rate in Africa.
Well,
could that be an explanation?
That explanation cannot be tenable. It is not because you have the maximum number of patients, of infected people, that should determine the location. What's the population of South Africa?
Well,
I'm coming. You see, the point is that when you said the two professors should be prepared for this, I know why. It's because the two professors have been against this type of vaccination, these international policies of that. We have refused to take the vaccine. And I ask the question now. You see, we are focusing on manufacturing vaccines, but we are not addressing the post-vaccine era. Now, we have seen that those people who are taking the vaccines, they are complaining about different things. It's not just a blood clotting ordinarily. They now say that, look, after 3 months, 6 months, all those things, the problem can become more complex. So no one is addressing that. I think that, attitudinally speaking, I would want to support a situation whereby Nigeria, if the South African factories will be there for manufacturing, there should be a COVID-19 special research center to look at the aftermath of this vaccination something, so that at least Nigeria can provide leadership in that area. Apart from that, you see, this international politics of vaccination, etc., is beginning to generate new controversies. And that's the issue.
Well, but science and scientists, we seem to be on top of it. And as for vaccines, Nigeria has been producing vaccines since the 1960s. But what happened to that process is another thing entirely.
You cannot be more correct.
And as for the issues you raised, those issues have already been addressed. And we've been told that the side effects, are not as important as the fact that people need to get vaccinated. And that some of the concerns raised, either about blood clotting and all that these have been exaggerated in many parts of the world.
That is why
Professor Arioli, your point of view.
No, it's very clear that South Africa has been participant in the research process of understanding the behavior of the virus. And they have taken samples in South Africa. So I'm not worried if WHO is interested in opening, or already they are there, of course, like you said now. They're already there and trying to...
The Fill and Finish project with
beyond
Johnson
South Africa, African Sub-Sahara, they have never been. I don't think there have been serious research about
Senegal is working with the Institute Pasteur.
There haven't been serious research on the behavior of the virus in Sub-Saharan Africa, beyond South Africa. And I expect people to think about that. And everybody is worried by the mRNA version of the vaccine. We have been having other vaccines before mRNA. mRNA, according to the scientists themselves, was developed because the hospitals in Europe and America were being overburdened by patients, and something had to be done very fast. And they accepted it that it's what they call concessionary or whatever
emergency authorization.
Exactly. So when it comes to emergency authorization,
instead of the 10-year period for vaccination making,
it's okay.
mRNA technology is also advanced technology.
Yes, but it's advanced, but it's not supposed to be used for this particular virus. That's what they said. It's because they have discovered that there is problem with people being admitted in the hospital, so there is a need to do something very fast, and that's what they call, what do you call it, the compassionate use of vaccine. They made it very clear. Yeah. It's compassionate use of vaccine. And they stated it very clear. Well, I'm very interested in our Director General of WTO. Talking of Nigeria, it's okay, because before going there, he was the chairman of the Vaccine Alliance. So if she was the chairman of Vaccine Alliance, he must also allow it to spread to Nigeria a bit. The benefit of Vaccine Alliance. There's no problem.
What we know is that in the United States, at least 2 vaccines have already gone beyond the emergency authorization state. They've approached the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, for biologics approval, which is the final stage of the approval. So I don't want us to put down the mRNA technology.
mRNA is the problem, basically. We have to be talking about something else.
I've been having a tough time here with the 2 professors. Okay, Yemi has not joined us yet. I hope she would, get back to the panel. Quickly, let's take our final topic. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin has been sentenced to 22.5 years in prison in the United States for the murder of George Floyd, whose dying gasp under Chauvin's knee led to the biggest outcry against racial justice in the United States in generations. The punishment handed out fell short of the 30 years that prosecutors had requested. With good behavior, Chauvin could be paroled after serving 2/3 of his sentence, or about 15 years. Let's take a look at that.
As to count one, based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2, paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute section 609.04, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You are granted credit for 199 days already served.
Well, the conviction of Derek Chauvin, policeman in Minneapolis, Minnesota in the United States, who kept his knee on the neck of George Floyd for 9 minutes and snuffed life out of him. Professor Akintenewa, will you say justice has been done? Will you say that the Black Lives Movement has been vindicated? Will you say that the apology that he gave in the form of an allocutus, will serve the purpose of, mediating the grief of the affected family?
You cannot be more correct on those 3 points you have raised. It's a welcome development, but not good enough. People like Chauvin should have been given longer sentence, really. But at least for 22.5 years in prison, that will serve as deterrence to some others. But the likelihood of that deterrence is another issue of debate, because after the incident, there have been other cases, the killings. So it doesn't give the impression that the American policemen, some of them, are really ready to change their attitudinal disposition to this act of wickedness in relating with some people. So in this case, let us congratulate those who protested against the killing. Let us commend the system of justice in the U.S., which has been predicated on objectivity of purpose, and perhaps more importantly, for the black people themselves to also learn lessons from there. That, look, there are some people who are monitoring you, who may not like you, so behave well. Do not argue where you shouldn't have argued. So I think that the soul of George Floyd, let God Almighty have pity on him. Let him rest in peace.
Well, very quickly, Yemi Adamalekun, I understand you are back with us. We've been talking about Derek Chauvin and the conviction by the judicial system in the United States. What's your take on that? Quickly, we have just about 5 minutes to go.
Thank you. I think, to sort of reiterate Prof's point, the fact that a very public case has gotten judgment. Yes, it's fewer years that was asked for, and they didn't ask for the maximum allowable by law. But the fact that it has judgment, the fact that a judge has denied a request for another trial, I think are significant milestones in the Black Lives Matter journey. But beyond Chauvin, I think now the hard work of sort of police reform versus defunding the police, which was the extreme that it was being taken to, is then back on the table in really doing the work in how police interact with black people, how they interact with people of color generally, and reorienting the whole notion of what a police force should be or should do in a community. So I think it is, it's certainly, it's encouraging, let me put it that way. It's encouraging for sort of citizens' movements around the globe, because the Black Lives Matter one was not just about the United States. in the United Kingdom, it picked up some elements that people hadn't particularly paid attention to. In Nigeria, is what they call black-on-black violence, because we had NSAS, which is, again, police brutality within a different context, similar to some degree, but different in other ways as well. But I think for me, it's also just the affirmation of citizens' voice, a reminder that in a democracy, or really literally in any system of government, that supposes to give space or agency to citizens, that citizens must step into that space, must own that space, and must make it very clear that what's representing them or what would be a reflection of their wishes is established, so to speak. And I think Black Lives Matter and Chauvin's judgment speaks positively to that.
Well, Professor Ariole, some people have said, well, the sentencing is even very light because there are persons in the U.S. who have been sentenced to life imprisonment for things they knew nothing about, for stealing maybe $139, just because of the color of their skin. Yes, but that he's been able to get this light sentence just because of the color of his skin.
No,
do you share that view?
So. He's working for the government. He's a police officer anyway. Whatever be the case, we wouldn't know what is in a real plan, according to Professor Akinteriwa. That is behind the scene message he had about how to handle the black people or whatever. We wouldn't know. But this is USA. I don't like to discuss too much about, because I myself, I have felt such justice or injustice processes in USA, personally. But I don't worry, because
you were a French person.
Yeah, but I still go to USA. I mean, I was kept somewhere in California airport for almost 4 hours for nothing. I don't report such things. I don't see it, but I just feel that, okay, if you are... I'm telling you, 2019, I was kept somewhere 4 hours in Los Angeles, coming from Vancouver to Los Angeles. But I wasn't worried, because I felt if they said they are doing their duty, I remained calm. I didn't worry myself till everything went the way they wanted it. So I feel this process, they will also learn, both the white and the black and the officers, so that USA will not be a case of, look, Republicans come tomorrow, they will parole this man and pardon him, and by the end, it will be as if Democrats are for blacks and Republicans are for the whites. And as we are talking, of course, Congresswoman Ilma and AOC will be rejoicing about the judgment, whether we like it or not. It's okay. Well, I can't go extreme. After all, the man is working for the government. And so it's USA peculiar case. People should learn that in that kind of space, it will always be somehow a racial issue. We don't know when it's going to end. But for sure, they are working towards helping themselves to see that it ends.
Well, I see you are promoting what they call the critical race theory.
Oh, yeah, but it's there.
There will ever be a time when the problem of race theory will ever be solved.
It's there.
Anyway, we'll see. You've been watching Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.